to was this. As you can see in this red box, these are the two new areas that have been added to our Canyon district, and that is north of our border. And the problem that we ran into was radio communication was not great in about half of those sections, mostly on the east side, closer to the mountain. And so I was asked to figure out like if there's a way we could adjust our repeaters or move the repeaters somewhere else. And so what I'm going to go over is what I did. And it had been quite a while since I used any surface analysis tools or spatial analysts or 3D analysts. So I kind of had to dig back in and learn how to do that. And for any of you guys who do this normally or have done it recently, it's not hard to do, especially if you have the tools in ArcGIS Pro. And I'm going to go over 3 different ways that you can kind of go about what I did. So I'll try to get to that in 20 minutes. All right. And before we do that, I just want to go over on this map really quick. So you see the new areas that were added to our Canyon district, and then these purple icons are representing our existing repeaters. The ones that we were focusing on, well, one in particular was our most northern eastern repeater right here. That was used mainly by the Canyon district. And I'm going to go through the sort of analysis that we did, focusing in on that repeater and the results, and then kind of a surprise that we ended up not thinking about from the analysis. So just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like, this is that antenna for that repeater. The repeater is actually in this, there's a manhole basically in this cement block right here, and it's all powered by solar. This is about 25 feet high. One problem we have with this repeater is it was optimized to basically see everything directly west of that and south and not north. North of that, again, was where you can see this red circle I've got right here. North of that is actually one of our reservoirs. It's up about 14 feet in elevation. And the area in red is kind of where those 2 new areas are at. And you probably get an idea why we're not getting very good line of sight right there for radios. So that gives you an idea of what that looks like in real life. So this is just a quick breakdown. So for those of you who just sorry for maybe not being very interesting on this, but for those of you who haven't, it's actually kind of a fun process to do some of this. So what you need in order to do some sort of 3D analysis, or surface analysis analytics is you need to have GIS software. So ArcGIS Pro is what I use, but I do know you can use QGIS and probably 1 or 2 others. Just they can use raster data analysis. I think everything does at this point. So I'll be talking about everything about Pro. Now in Pro, you have 3 different options that I'm aware of, and I'm going to go through hopefully in Pro, like as a demo, how to use these 3 really quickly. So the first one I'm going to look at is ready-to-use tools. You guys may have seen this, you may have used it. In your ribbon, though, it is up here. It says ready-to-use tools, and there's some drop-downs. And the viewshed one is what you would use here, or what I could use. And the nice thing about these is they're out of the box, and it doesn't use any credits. I think maybe it used to, but it doesn't anymore. And the DEM is provided. So depending on what area you're in, your DEM resolution may vary. For me, it was incredible. I verified survey grade GPS that we have with our valves, and we're on within half a foot of the DEM. So that was unexpected. I didn't think it was going to have that good resolution. The second option you have is the exploratory 3D analyst tool set, and this arrow is pointing down to that. This is in the workflows ribbon, and it's in the right here, the exploratory 3D analyst. Those you can actually use without having any kind of license for either 3D analyst or the other license, which I can't remember off the top of my head what that is. But so anybody at a basic level license can still use these exploratory 3D analyst tools. And then the third option is actually using the 3D analyst tools in the toolbox, which you do need to have a 3D analyst license. or that other surface licensure. They're kind of the same, but I have a 3D analyst license. And then the other thing you need besides those tools is you do need to have a DEM of your own if you're going to be using the exploratory or the 3D analyst tools. But again, you can use the Esri provided DEM on the greater tools. And then you can input in real time or on the fly your vector data, or you can use your existing vector data. And that's about all you need to do this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is jump into Probe and just show you that area of interest for us anyway. So we have two boundaries right here, and I'm going to zoom in just a bit. You can see these are the structures that Farmington provided me, and then I convert those to points. And from there, I'm going to go through those three tools. First, I'll use actually, before I do that, let me show you one more thing. This is that repeater right there that I'm circling in purple. So what I'm going to do is jump into the tools, if I can remember how to get there. So you go to Analyst here, and then here's those ready-to-use tools. And I'm going to maybe turn off some of this a little bit. Let's taxing on this whole computer. All right. So I'm going to go to ViewShed. And again, these are ones that you can use without any kind of license or your own DM. And it's going to run through this dialog right here. So my input point feature, I'm not interested in all the repeaters. So I'm going to select my repeater right there that I want to do a ViewShed from. And I think this should, yep, so it's going to use that selected there. My maximum distance, I'm just going to do 3 miles in this case. That's as far out as I really care about for right now. This DEM resolution, I'm just going to set it to fine. These other ones, if you have a very, very large area, you can't use the finest or 10 meter. You need to use these other ones. But for my small area, this is good. My observer height. So that is going to take into account the elevation of my repeater at the DEM ground level. So it knows that this is sitting there. And so my observer height is going to be 25 feet. That's the top of that antenna. And I'm going to change that feet. And then the surface offset is basically the height above the surface of the object you review. So the default value is 0, but I'm going to put 6 feet in there, just so if you're a person, you're about 6 feet tall. I believe that's how that should work. This generalized visualized polygon, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to run this. So I don't think this one should take too long. I did try this. I normally don't work on this machine. There we go. So everything we see here in orange is actually what you can see. So that is our ViewShed. Now, if you look here, let me turn this back on just for a second. That covers a little more than half of those two areas. That's not great. And when they were doing the radio testing, this is pretty much what it did find. And they almost couldn't talk at all, or really, really smoky is what the radio guys said it sounded like in our eastern side. And one of the problems is the steakhouse where they use for the EOC, I believe, is right there, and that's outside of our range of ViewShed. But that is a really quick way that you can get a ViewShed without having any licensing or even your own DM. And it works fast in that old machine like this. So I'm going to run over the next tool that we use, and that I experimented with, I should say. And if I go back to the PowerPoint, just so you can see what that was. That is this exploratory 3D analyst. So the way you get to those is back in the analyst tab up here. And then under in this workflows tab set, we've got this right here. And the reason I think that's not popping up is I believe I need to have either have to be in 3D mode, which, yeah, that's actually the case. So if you don't know this, I just found this out, but you can make this map into your 3D scene really easily by right-clicking your map, and then you can hit convert, and you can do either a global or a local. I've already done that. It takes a minute on this machine, so that's what we're looking at right here. So that is one thing you do have to have that I didn't mention earlier. You need to be in a 3D scene, and then you can see these tools are available to us. So I could run the view shed again right here, which I'm going to maybe show you how to do, but I'm not going to run because it's going to take a minute, I think, in this case. But you have more options with this. And I'll show you what those options are. Whatever you have selected in your ground down here will be what it's going to do the analysis off of. If you look above this, I could pull this down. I have this LiDAR bare earth. This is the stuff from 2013, 2014 that UGRC has provided. And the other thing that's great is you have the first return from that same data set. And this is where we definitely ran into some differences on our analysis. Not necessarily the bare earth and as we provided world elevation. Those are pretty much the same. But as you can imagine, the first return stuff provided a lot of different results. So this is you couldn't do this in the previous tool I showed you. You were restricted to Esri's DEM. But this is where, without, again, a 3D license, you can go ahead and run your own DEMs, and then you can go through here and tweak as you want. So you can set, and I'm not going to do this in real time, so it will take long on this, but I've got my heading, I've got a tilt. Those I don't really worry about too much. I've messed with those and they didn't really change the analysis. But the offset, again, that's your vertical offset from your ground elevation. And then you have some, if you want to have a 360 degree, just make this 360s, or you can have it angled however you want it. This vertical doesn't do much either in this analysis, at least for what I was doing. And then you can set your maximum, your minimum analysis on this. Actually, I think this one might work fast. Let's just try this. So if I do the same thing, and we'll do this from our LiDAR first return, I'm going to set this again to 3 miles and 360 heading. I think this is all about the same, except my vertical offset is actually, that doesn't matter. It's my offset up here. It's 25 feet on top of that point that I'm going to actually, in this case, this is more interactive. I'm not actually selecting a vertex or a point or anything like that. I'm going to let my tool here, which is this interactive placement, snap to the base of that right here. So if I hit this, it should run. There we go. It's still on my computer. Yeah. And then you kind of explore, different 3D angles and get lost in this pretty easily to figure out the controls. But if I was to try to overlay that with this right here, see if I can get this to go in here. Start to see the differences as you'd expect, but how different it is actually surprising me with the first return. Yeah, this computer just is having a hard time displaying all this. There we go. It's kind of coming in right there. So this starts to get a little bit messy and hard to see. So there's another way of doing this, which is pretty interesting and kind of cool. So what I'm going to show you next in this exploratory 3D analyst set, the only other tool that I really use is this line of sight tool right here. So we just looked at the view shed. We turn some of this off. Oh, well, the way I do that, I need to clear that. So the one thing about using these exploratory tools, they're not permanent. They don't save in your project. The only thing that I found that you can really export from here is the node point you took. There's not a lot of value that I have seen in saving that, at least for what I was doing. So that's gone. What I'm going to do here is interactively just start drawing sort of line of sights, and you can do single or multi. I've got this set up right here to do the same thing we were just doing, 25 feet. This is 3 miles, so it doesn't really matter because we'll be going that far. So it's going to be sort of the same process. I'm going to grab my point here and then start to just drag this line out in theory. Come on. This works good on modern computers. But you can kind of see what's happening here. It's in real time kind of feeling where it can see, where it can't. And that kind of makes sense because in that area, and I can put multiples here and start to fan this out. But when I get over here, it should start to not like what it's seeing, but that's weird that it's turning around. There we go. Yeah, I think it's just this computer is really glitching on me. But you get the idea. This is kind of cool because you can get a really, really good idea in real time, like a direct line. If you have a very, very specific spot you want to get to, you can start to mess with this. And so let me show you what I mean by that. Oh, dang it, I just erased that. This is the thing about this, though. It's very temperamental until you really know your controls, and there is no undo of undoing. So let me try just one of these really quick. I'm going to do a single point, right? Well, I'll do multiples one time. We'll hurry. So we're going to go blast here, here, here. Let's just do 2 more. And I want to get one on that stake center, which I believe is there. Okay. So I'm going to try to not screw this one up. What I want to do is in real time, like start to move this around and see like how high I would have to go to get those to go green or get side of line of sight. And so this is kind of cool and interesting if you haven't worked in 3D much. And I know I'm getting short on time, so I'm going to go as quick as I can here. But you can measure vertically, and I have never actually done this before. And GIS, I've always measured some XY bit. This actually works, and so you can see, well, I have it as a 25-foot offset. Is that really 25 feet? And so you can look at this and at least try to measure it. Again, like the tool would normally work a lot faster. It's just not. There we go. It's just glitching. But the last thing I want to show you on this, which is cool. So if I go to properties, and I'm still right now, I've got these selected by hit all. Then you have these controls that you can start to mess with. So I can grab this and pull it up. And then what you can see, except I've got something in the way down here where I can't see the Z, is you can actually see your values change as you pull up and down. And you can see, okay, how high do I actually need to go? You can't see it here, but in this case, it's like 150 feet. It's like not really going to work in that location. You can then, if you wanted, you can start to move, not those, not what I meant to do. You can move your, you can move that or that, but you get the idea. So I'm going to hurry and get to the very last thing that I'm going to, yeah, for really quick. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, cool. I have 2 for some reason. Yeah. All right. Although that clock's wrong. So are you looking up that? Or? It's 3:23. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. So let's. Yeah, and I can't really undo that stuff, so I'm just going to clear this out. So to clear this out, you can just escape. Maybe that's how I did it last time when I got rid of it, but it's not doing it now. So I've got to be in this analysis tab. I got to be in here, and then I'm going to hit clear all. All right. Oh, I hide that. Okay, that's what you know. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this tool, and I'm going to show you back in my PowerPoint the last thing here, which is our actually using our tools in a 3D analyst tool set. So that is accessed through, as you can imagine, your toolbox in processing toolboxes and 3D analyst tools, or there is the spatial analyst. That's what they have a lot of the same tools if you're not familiar with those. In this case, I'm looking in the visibility toolbox right here. And there's a few ways of going about this. What I did mostly is I used the line of sight again and the view shed. There is one more thing you need to do for the line of sight, and that is you need to construct your sight lines. And I'm not going to do that because that is taxing. I'm going to show you what that does look like, though, because I have saved them here. They're all here. Oh, I need to be back in this map right here. So these tools you can run. You don't need to be in a 3D map. And this is that. And I think that's why I wasn't seeing everything. Yeah, that's right. All right, so you can see in my results grouping that I've got here, I've got some stuff that I've already ran. First one I want to look at is sort of what we've already been looking at. This RCR is our Rick's Creek Reservoir. That is that repeater that we've been looking at the entire time. This one in purple right here. So what you have to do first is run this tool called Construct Sightlines. And what that will do is I made every structure, I just got a centroid of that, and then I ran from here a line to each one of those using this Construct Sightlines. It's very straightforward. But you have to do that before you can run your line of sight tool. So after you get those going, then you run the line of sight tool, just so you can see what that looks like. It is basically the same. Again, you can pick your input surfaces here. So this is nice because you can compare again at different times from your first return and then your bare earth and anything else you have. Make some adjustments in there. So when I ran that with the bare earth, this is what we got. And again, this is a little more exact, right? This is going to every house. It's a little more thorough, and I can save it, which is nice. I can do whatever I want with this in the database. And it pretty much shows what we were looking at earlier on that view shed and when we were drawing the line of sight. So it's nice validation that we're still seeing the same thing. Now, this was kind of nice. We were thinking, well, we could maybe move this over, we could raise it. But when we realized that we were only looking at bare earth when we first ran this, we decided to start running our first return. And that's what we got, unfortunately. So we really lost a lot of the western portion of that area. And then the person I was working with, he actually was the old public works director at Centerville, and he now helps out run emergency management in Centerville. He came down to my office, and we were kind of looking at this. He said, well, what if we, use our repeater we have at Public Works? And it's something I hadn't thought of at all. I was trying to get other things to work. For instance, this yellow repeater I put in, which is at an old well site, which isn't being used. And I thought, well, we could throw some solar in there and get that raised up to 60 feet, and that might work. That analysis, after doing that, still didn't give us what we were looking for. I think, and that's showing us right here. It didn't help us out much. That was only 45 feet. I think realistically I had to get to 120 feet to get these to start to go green. So that still wasn't a very good option. It would have been nice because we had infrastructure. But we do have infrastructure at our public works, and we have a lot of it. So we went up on the building here, and I don't know if you can see these very well, but I've got we've got this antenna on the right, which we're using, I think that is or was for UCAN. And then we have 4 or 5 little antennas at the bottom, which are really hard to make out in this picture right here. There you go, you can see those. That we have used for individual repeaters for areas, or sorry, districts. And then we have this one on the left, which is, I think we estimate that's about 50 feet high. That was not being used. So we thought, what if we just hook this up to a repeater that we're not using for that district because it hadn't been an issue before. And the results were pretty good. So what we came up with, I'm just gonna go through on this PowerPoint just to make it a little bit quicker. I took screenshots of this. So here is the analysis we did on the right. You can see our repeater because it's in 3D, it's kind of in a weird position, but it's pretty much where we think it would be. And we don't get quite as good coverage on the west side, but we get really good coverage on the eastern side right there, which is really what we're concerned about, because the west side is very much covered by this repeater that we already have existing. So that was encouraging. On the bare earth, it's 100% covered. So we think that we are within, you're going to be somewhere between the bare earth and somewhere between the first return. So we're feeling pretty good about getting this hooked up. We haven't hooked it up yet to do the testing on that. One other thing I want to do is create an interactive map that we just have on our phones. We can go in the red zones or the places that are outside of the view shed, see if those are actually really the analysis that we're getting, that, yeah, it's a dead area or it's a smoky area, and then, of course, go into the green areas, see if that really works. So I think what we're going to be doing is getting this set up on our public works, kind of like in a really ad hoc fashion before we really get it set up, and where we'll be testing it. But it's basically based off all this analysis. This screenshot right here is observed from that most northeastern area that we're concerned about. And it's going horizontally basically through that line of sight. And as you can see on the right side, that stuff is really good coverage. The building here, I believe, is the church or the stake center. And then these are some houses on the east side that you got a little bit of red in there, but it's looking pretty promising. And here's a little better image of what that looks like. You can, oh, that's the other thing I want to say, and then I'll kind of wrap this up. You can, on your analysis, which is what's cool, you can change your DEM in real time. So I don't have to redraw any of this right here. And that's what I tried to illustrate on these two pictures, comparing the surfaces, DEM on the fly. This one, as you can see, is the first return. Everything's draped over it. You can see we've got some blockage right here. But I can just switch that in the computer, or sorry, on the table of contents, and you can see that it's totally clear right there. So the last couple of things to take note of, I think I already mentioned this, the ready-to-use service tools don't require any credits. You can just do this right out of the box. You can do it with a basic license. There's a link down here. I can send this out if anyone's interested. The one thing I didn't do, which if you have a larger area, you would probably definitely want to do, is a geodesic view shed, which takes into account the Earth's curvature. And your DEM does need to be in a vertical coordinate system, which these DEMs that I was using, they actually weren't. So there's a little more setup for that is going to be a little more accurate, especially at a larger scale. I'm not going to go through all that right now. Make sure you're checking all of your elevations, that you're using meters and or feet. You're not mixing them up. This is a whole thing. If you guys haven't looked at this, on this elevation tab, when you right-click on your features and your table of contents, elevation is really important on this and where you're going to set that. And there's a lot of literature in YouTube University on that stuff, so I'll go through that. And the only other limitations I think I mentioned is you can't, there's a limited number of line of sight instances. You will run out, and you'll see this message right here. So I think I got like 25, 26 different lines that you can hurry and fan out. But then it'll shut it down. So you ran out of service, or ran out of resources. And then you can't save those feature class. And that's about it. So that's quick.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah.
We do have just a couple minutes if anyone has questions for Mike.
And how well do you break waves building trees?
So I'm not a radio expert. These are things I've actually asked Randy, the person who's helping me out, who is kind of a radio geek. And yeah, there's interference, but his solution, and another reason we didn't want to use that existing well site when we need to use solar, is we can't really put a lot of power and pushing. Apparently you can really amp up, and I don't understand all this, but the radio transmission and the stuff that we have apparently can do that, especially if you have a power source to do that. So he wasn't too concerned about the trees. Now, metal buildings obviously are a different situation, but where we're at, there are some next to us but we're much higher than any of those that we'd be concerned about. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm very, very interested to see how this actually works compared to what we've done. See real world what happens. So.
What kind of radios are they using?
Yeah. Well, I think I can show you really quickly because you guys might know about this type of stuff more than I do. This is an old computer with an old data stuff on here. Let me see if I can hurry and get to this. All right, good scan. Radio, here we go. Okay, so here is, you guys might be able to make sense of this. Let me zoom in on this a little more. So here is a map that Randy made back in 2009 of our setup. So our public works buildings here, there's that UCAN antenna I was talking about. And here's one of the repeaters that has been in use for the UCAN, so 800 megahertz. Here's our channels. I know we're using VHF and UHF, so we have a UHF repeater that's happening at one of our reservoirs, and then everything else I believe is VHF. And so like 450, 1-800, I don't know. You guys want to explain this diagram to me? Does that make any sense to you about what radios are using?
UHF and VHF versus like ham radios. That's that's how much I know, right there.
Okay, yeah, and you know more than
It's more like on a radio channel. So like you've got somebody who does Christmas lights and has a radio station you can turn into for their music, but it's just like right there. This is a repeated version, I think.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much. That was great. I actually didn't really know anything about radio when I decided for this.
Oh, cool.
I have not used the VShed tool.
Good.
So,
All right.
Yeah, the VShed tool looks cool.
It's kind of frustrating. We've done a little bit of this in Salt Lake, but it's frustrating. Your first return of PM, laurels, fall trees, as if they were good. Yeah, I mean, it's 2.5. And so it's a very conservative way of doing it for the first return.
That's exactly what we're hoping for. Have you guys like tested that much on your analysis on that yet?
No, we've got some already. In Salt Lake City, and they handle most of it. So they do ask me for some of that, but yeah. Sure, much of it.
Okay.
all right. Just stop presenting. And next up, we have got Roger Dunn, Python Wizard.
All right. All right, that was a good presentation, Mike. I appreciate that. I learned a lot. I am the data catalog specialist for UMETT, and whenever I'm in a new capacity, I like to figure out what I have access to do a job. And so I got a map from Melissa Blue. This is a full project, and it has a database connection to formerly AGRC, but currently UGRC. And there are a lot of data sets in this database connection. And I wondered what is in those data sets, and found that at least in ArcGIS Pro, I couldn't access any metadata. So what I decided to do was build a Python notebook, because that's my solution to everything. And I present it to you today for inspection. So we're going to go ahead and just run some cells. And what is going on is there is a cache file. that is stored on the computer where the notebook resides. So when you're in ArcGIS Pro, if you click on the name of your project and then click on the full path of your project, it'll open Windows Explorer with your project highlighted. Well, this little file here, UGRC cache, is a text file of information that has been pulled from the UGRC database. So what as I run the script, I get a little prompt that says, hey, the cache file does exist. It was last modified on August 18th. Do you want to use this one? Do you want to overwrite it? So I'm going to say, no, don't overwrite it. And the reason I don't want to is because it takes a long time to build. So like 30 minutes or something like that. So down here, again, I'm just going to keep clicking the run button. It's going to say, type a word. UGRC layers will be searched by feature class and field name. And one of the ones I frequently search for is the word flood. That was a famous album by They Might Be Giants, but that is outside the topic of this discussion. Click next. So what it's telling me is that it found 3 data sets that have the word flood in their name, but also a data set that does not have flood in its name, but has a field called flood. In the next cell, it's prompting me, hey, you want to add any of these layers to your map? Just type their numbers separated by spaces and they'll be added for you. So I'm going to do 1 space 3, press enter, and I've got to run the next cells too. Please wait while your layers are added to the map. This is a courtesy message so you don't get impatient, but you are allowed to get impatient anyway. It's going to pull those layers from UGRC and add them to your map, and it just takes a little bit. So there's 1 layer. There's the Salt Lake flooding that's been added. The reason why I added that feature is because I didn't want to go through this long list and hunt for one of the search results. So I just had you type it in by number. And the other one will be coming in shortly. There it is, water stream gauges in HD. So the script is now completed. And if I look at my map, there's those layers on there. Now, some shortcomings of the script. 1, it does take a long time to build that cache. So perhaps I could add some multi-threaded code that would kind of divide and conquer and reach a bunch of data sets at once and cache it to a text file when it's ready. I currently only allow 1 word to be searched. This could be expanded to maybe do some more smart searching, like looking for different forms of words. Like if you were to type in a plural word, maybe you could look at the singular version of that word and find those in data sets. This is just an alpha version of the script, but other members of UMETT saw this and thought that I had to show everybody what that looked like and how it worked. And so there you go. There you have it. So that's the script.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. And I'm going to talk a little bit at the end of today's meeting about where UMETT is kind of looking to adjust our short-term goals. And we really want to bring resources because there's like a lot of knowledge dispersed throughout the board and UMETT at large. And I think that one thing that we are not leveraging is everyone's knowledge and tools that they've built and trainings and resources and templates. And so one of our goals moving forward is going to be sharing that throughout UMETT a little bit more. But are there any questions for Roger?
Are you pulling down that into the local database, or are you just using REST service?
So the question is whether I'm copying the data to my local geodatabase or using the REST service. And the answer is that I'm using the REST service. Now these layers will persist though. So if I save my project and exit, they'll be there. A previous version of my script did not do that. So any other questions? Anything in the chat? Nothing in the chat, okay.
What other terms do you think you might want to search for
The question is, what other terms might I want to search for? So it really depends on the user of the map. So here's some scenarios that I thought of. Somebody that is an expert in earthquake wants to make an earthquake type map before such a thing occurs. So they might search the data sets for quake, liquefaction, and start building their map, before an emergency. My hope was also that this would be fast enough to use post-emergency to start searching data sets for whatever kind of event just occurred. So those are my intents there. Thank you.
We've got a question online. Does it just search layer name and field, or can it also search all attribute values?
I thought about searching attribute values, and I think that would bloat the size of the cache quite a bit. So what I decided to do is just search for field names. I'll give you an example of why that was important to me. I worked for the city of Orem, and let's say that I was doing a search that included Orem. Well, Orem might come into 100 different data sets that cover the state. So it would be more difficult for me to parse through that and find out what was really of interest to me. So I do just search field names and data set names. Great question. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The last presenter today, we have Melissa Blue. Okay, now let's see if I can show. Okay. Oh, this is not starting at the beginning. Here we go. Okay, so one of the things I had to do this spring was to make an evacuation map for Savannah, and I did not get great information from the intermediaries. So I thought I would give a short presentation on how to throw together an evacuation map. This is a first draft, how to get the first one out there, and then kind of start finessing it and making it a little bit better. First thing was, what hazards are we possibly evacuating for? The top three in Cottonwood Heights were earthquakes, flooding, and fire. I'm sure that there are others around the state. I don't think we have time for a big discussion, but what hazards are going to be in your area? Are there going to be other things that you may need to evacuate for? And then what are the topology hazards? Cottonwood Heights has a lot of creeks and bluffs and steep slopes, and somebody on one street, maybe up on the top of the bluff, and the street at the bottom of the bluff, you've got to drive 1.5 miles around in order to get from one house to the other. So kind of what are those areas, subdivisions that are isolated with only one entrance in and out, crossing the creeks and bridges, things like that. What are going to be the problems? And then I looked at a lot of different evacuation maps. A lot of them were hurricane maps. I liked the coding of, in a hurricane, you're going to evacuate from the shore inland. But we kind of know that, fire is more likely to occur up on the top of the hillside and coming down. We know if we have flooding, we're going to be evacuating from the creeks out. So kind of playing with that idea. This map was, okay, the fire's here, and then we're going to evacuate by townships. Sizes, just the survey townships is how they have it set up. They probably have main roads along those township lines, making that a little easier, but it's not always the case. This one is another
hurricane map, but this one highlights the roads. These are going to be the main roads going out. Some interstates do have the ability to be flipped so that you can evacuate out both directions. It depends on the area. Some they can do it both directions. Sometimes they can't because they know they're going to use the other direction for incoming assistance. And it can take a lot of manpower to man every one of those exits saying, hey, you can't go this way, you got to go the other way. But that is a possibility. This one, I didn't like the names. It was one of my examples of, I don't know that I want to name my evacuation zones with codes. We have those in our districts and precincts, which don't necessarily line up exactly with where we would be evacuating, because we are using those LDS states and wards for our districts and precincts. Gotta love a good volunteer base and partners. So this doesn't tell us much about where those are. Maybe they make more sense to the person who's there. They're based around towns. It just didn't make a lot of sense for me. This one used a monochromatic color scheme. So that's, me come back to here. So this is the, I'll just change the size and fix it, sort of. So we start with the city boundary, and we did have a city boundary change. We're looking at another city boundary change in the next few months. So this has already had to be adjusted once. The main concern of our current emergency manager was isolated areas. So we, oh, did it really just delete that? I needed to have brought a mouse. So these are our various isolated areas. We've got a large group of apartment complexes up here. That there's only the one road in and out. All of these apartment and condo buildings are accessed through this one road. So we know that that is going to need to be evacuated a little faster. And again, large condo complex here, accessed out through one road. Yes, Roger?
Melissa, was that figured out like through some network analysis, or was that institutional knowledge?
That was institutional knowledge. I'm sure there was a way to do it through network analysis, but especially where our emergency management is located within our police department, they just already knew. These are the problems that we're going to run into, because they've run into problems getting in and out of their with ambulances and accessing emergencies and things. So we have several of these isolated areas that are just not a lot of access. This one has like 2 accesses that go around this church building, but everything else ends in a cul-de-sac. So these are concern areas. So these are kind of a little more high priority. I sent this map to Savannah, and she was like, no, that's wrong. And I was very glad that she let me know that that was not what she needed, and that we were able to figure it out a little bit better. So then we took everything else and divided it into chunks. They're much bigger chunks because they have a lot more access in and out. And dividing out like this piece up here, this is all commercial. So this would be a totally different kind of evacuation out of a commercial area than it would be out of these residential areas. But they still are now divided up. And then, I'm not going to city boundary. So this one is south of Fort Union. And this one is south of Bengal. And so these all have names. Cottonwood Cove. So that is the neighborhood that would need to be evacuated. This one appears Tabachi. This one is another, it only has one road in and out, and it is a giant vaulted hairpin turn bridge to get in there. So good luck to them. It's so these are those first areas that we've got. And then we added evacuation routes. Let's see. Hey, these are sized for a 36 by 36 map. So they look really funny in this version. They show up better on the map they're sized for. So this is the road that would come out from this area. And then most of our evacuation routes are to the west and downhill. Is the overall, what direction do I evacuate? To the west and downhill. Unlikely that you're going to want to go up into the mountains, and more roads, the more west and downhill you go. So we've got these evacuation routes where the exits are from the various neighborhoods. So those are the evacuation areas. Then these are all in one layer. I've just separated them out with definition queries for live demonstration. You know how that can go. I did do a by status, added a field to our evacuation layer that is a status. So a 1 would be evacuate now. Orange, number 2 would be ready to evacuate. 3 would be things are happening around you, but you don't have to evacuate yet. And then we've got you have not been assigned anything. And these are just somewhat random that I set out. The next version of this, I need to have better zones around the creeks, because these are mostly made for a potential fire evacuation, not a flooding or creek evacuation. So I need to split some of these a little bit more so that we don't need to evacuate people at the top of the bluff for a flood, but we do need to evacuate the people at the bottom of the bluff for a flood. And we have had to look at doing that once in this little neighborhood here, just above the water plant. It only has one road in and out, and that one road in and out is a bridge. So we did have one of our ham radio operator volunteers during the flooding, not this year, but last year. He took his lawn chair down there with his radio, and he sat and just watched the creek. And if it rose past a certain point, he was supposed to call it in. Luckily, we didn't have that happen. But he was ready to go. So he was having a grand time just watching the snow melt. But that was our biggest concern that spring, was that spot, just because it's fairly early in Little Cottonwood Creek within the city boundaries, and it is an isolated little island. So that is how I put together a first draft of an evacuation map. It's certainly not perfect yet, but those were the considerations in putting together the first one. Any questions?
Yeah, you use the main roads primarily as the division, the boundaries between.
Yeah, for the go back to these ones. So other than the isolated areas, this is Bengal Boulevard and this is Fort Union Boulevard up here. So those are main roads, using those as a boundary. Stuff to the east of Wasatch is going to be one kind of evacuation, and stuff to the west of Wasatch is going to be another, for the most part. So we just kind of want to keep an eye on those areas. And then those main roads, just make it easy. If you are south of Bengal, you need to evacuate. That's an easy delineation line.
Yeah, that's a little bit different than what we do in Salt Lake, where we have like, say, the avenues or, along the East Bench.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a lot of roads, but they're not main roads necessarily. There are a lot of residential roads. And we don't necessarily want to evacuate the entire avenues.
Right.
Maybe just a certain street or something. But what we end up doing for those areas is evacuating both sides of the street. Just because we don't want people bugging out on one side of the street, their neighbors are on the other side.
What do I do?
What's going on? So that's how we handle it in areas that don't have these really nice giant streets, but looks like these ones, those are definitely a little different situation.
Yeah, there's probably some room to break those bigger ones down into, like east of Highland and west of Highland.
We have like primary and secondary, but primary is typically, and this is for wildfire. So the primary is like right up against the boundary, and then if that one goes, then we have the secondary as well. So it might be like Z number 1, Z number 2, but we use a common, like easy to understand game. So
Yeah, and we have the codes for our districts and precincts that they are based off of, like Brighton 1 is, so it's BR01. Well, that's Brighton First Ward, and Creek, and then Whitmore, and so they're based on somewhat common knowledge of the area.
and how do people know if they're in the area or not?
That's a good question that we haven't gotten to yet. That is, we are getting a new emergency manager starting this week. So
We just have some web maps and tell everybody to look at.
yeah, this is probably going to become a web map. We're not to that point yet, but it is coming.
You can color code is our web map that you can color code on the fly. So we have an evacuation for this red, etc. Yeah, that's great. I didn't realize you had something in those isolated areas like that. That's horrifying.
It is a little bit scary. Salt Lake County was a little bit of the wild west in the 50s and 60s. Things were there are some interesting neighborhoods that were set up before Cottonwood Heights was incorporated.
Just what it was like during the rush to take the kids to school.
City Hall is across the street from the high school. It's a little insane some mornings. So there's some interesting areas there. And as the gravel pit develops, it's only going to get more and more interesting there along Wasatch.
Have you guys thought about, so going up on a powder day on Wasatch Boulevard and you're backed up sometimes literally to I-15,
Mm-hmm.
and you're sitting there for maybe 3 hours, have you guys thought about an evacuation route with that street being like 100% full?
Not in any meetings I have been in. So traffic on Wasatch and ski days is a huge issue in the city, but specifically evacuating at that point.
I was
Not
worried about
talking.
sitting in, I was out there for a good 60 days over the last couple of years for hours, and just looking like just across from the fire department, those guys trying to get in and out, and when they had to get out,
Mhm.
or just people in those neighborhoods like trying to take their kids to school.
Oh, they get so mad.
I can't, I read the day when there's something that actually happened there. I'm just wondering if that's Michael Blair or some kind of routing that you guys have looked at, what would possibly happen.
It's on the to-do list. And we definitely have people that will cut through along Prospector and then try and come out on Big Cottonwood. And the neighborhood is not happy when people do that. Especially with all the construction on Prospector right now. They just are like, we cannot handle more people. So I know they've added some specific traffic enforcement people that are supposed to be helping direct traffic on those powder mornings. But but I haven't been involved directly in that.
One thing that we considered downtown Salt Lake with so many people there during the daytime, if we had an evacuation, it was chaos, I'm sure. One way to get around that, I thought would be really cool, would be to customize evacuation routes, maybe 3 or 4 different scenarios based on bridges that were open and closed, and things like that. But literally, model the evacuation routes taking right-hand turns only, and do it individually for every block face of the city. Which is just a 5 final move, but it would say, so it'd say evacuate downtown, use option C. So the idea would be that we would just have these PDFs already generated, and you come into work one day and your boss says, hey, it's coming down through corporate, that everybody needs to download this packet and put it in your glove box in your car. And it would have your individual block face the way out, and it would be plan A through that or whatever.
Wow.
And that would be absolutely doable if there was political will. We can stuff. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we could, we have considered, what happens if our bridges go out. Because there are so many, major artery bridges, in the city that you get cut off from going north at all, with the bridges. So.
And my other concern is like hazmat. Evacuate, which direction are you going to evacuate directly?
Yeah, there is always another scenario, and we just try and plan for many of.
We don't have a great answer for that, but again, you could do a sector-based geoprocessing tool that started from the hazmat location to the current weather, and then came up with a messaging to evacuate northeast or whatever. But that's not something we did hand, but it's not done. But no, this is great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Melissa, and thank you to all of our presenters today. I'm thrilled with all the information that was shared and discussed. We're running a little bit behind, but I am going to take about 5 minutes just to talk about what UMETT is looking at doing moving forward and adjusting our short-term goals. We still want to prioritize long-term building that kind of response team where we're able to, eventually deploy across, like if somebody is needing help, responding to an incident in their community. However, there are limitations with that, and Savannah knows, trying to build the IMG just for the Salt Lake County region, there's like a lot of questions that need to be answered for that. So in the short term, we are looking at trying to curate and provide resources, templates, Python notebooks, ArcPro projects, training videos. And so if everyone can get that your phone, I want to take a little poll. Do this. All right. Join the meeting with the QR code. And if you have to hop off, and if anyone needs, this was recorded, so I'll be sending that out, and I'll also try and get everyone's presentations if they have slides to share as well. But just for the sake of time, I'll move right through this. Maybe. All right. So these are the topics that we have identified as a board that we thought would be interesting or useful for GIS and emergency management across the state. So that includes incident maps, evacuation areas, empowered data, fire training and responding to an incident, damage assessments, naming conventions, situational awareness, critical infrastructure, authoritative data layers, WebESC and Crisis Track, ArcGIS Online, and iPods alerts. So these are what we've identified, and we want to see kind of what's of most interest to everyone, maybe what we prioritize first, because like as we're putting this together, it's definitely, it's going to be a list, and we're really excited to do it, but if we know what people are most interested in, we can prioritize doing that. So I'll give you another 20 seconds or so, then I'll move on to the next one. And the other thing to note with this is if you have a template or resource that you would like to share, or an example of like a case study of doing any of this that you'd like to share with us, we would love to include that. And we're building out a hub site that's going to house all of these resources. Okay. Next. All right. Are there any topics that were not listed there that you would be interested in? Yeah, that's something that I just ran into actually at the state. Empower data is actually highly sensitive data about people who use electricity dependent medical devices, and it's used by responders. But we have that provided, or like we have an agreement with the state of Utah, DHHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, and we have an app built out where we can allocate accounts and share that as it's needed and requested. There's like a line of agreements that you need to get access to the data, but it's used in like wildfire response to know like who might need extra assistance. I won't go any like more into it right now, but I am putting together a document on explaining what it is and who might need it and when you need it, how to get it, all that good stuff.
I would check that box.
Yep. For sure. All right. Highfield, yeah, that the public Highfield data set is gone now.
Going away, yeah. You can sign up for an account with the private version of it, but again, you have to sign up. But yeah, the open data source is not going to be available.
I got set up with the Highfield Secure. It was not bad. I mean, it took a little bit of time, but having somebody who had said, I'll sponsor you, really made that much easier.
Savannah, do you mind updating the rest of us about the wildland urban interface stuff and where that data product is before these people continue to ask me to create something for them that the state needs to create?
With House Bill 48?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. Every jurisdiction needs to adopt the WUI code. It's from 2006. And then they also need to have a map of their WUI boundary. And we can work with you to actually make that boundary, but yeah, every city needs to have that too. And I can send you information from our previous emergency managers meeting that has more information on like what the state's expecting from the local level and then what the state's actually going to be doing. It's still a bit of a mess though, to be honest.
So like as like a local municipality or a county, are we responsible for creating our own mapping? Just like the legislation reads that like forestry required and state lands is making the actual boundary product.
They're making the tool that will determine the rates that people will get in high-risk areas. That's what they're making, like a web app. But as far as like your boundary itself, like you have to make that, if that makes sense.
So using like the RAP data from FFSL to make your own boundary, and then, but like your boundary might be different from like the high risk that the state is saying.
Yes, because House Bill 48 is basically charging people a certain amount in a fee for the high risk areas, but the other people will just need assessments of their property every year. And so they need to use the WUI boundary in order to determine like what areas they actually need to inspect every year. But we can talk offline because I feel like it's a whole other thing. Yeah. But if anyone else online or in this room is interested in that, then let me know. I'll provide you with information.
right, thank you, Savannah. And yeah, let's take note of these topics that and add those to our list for sure. So thank you for that input. And then, are there any questions you can unmute or just ask, or add them if you don't want to unmute or ask? But that is pretty much all I have for today. And then those in the room, Savannah is going to be showing us around Salt Lake County ECC. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Woo! Sean has raised his hand. Go ahead, Sean.
I'd have to unmute.
I didn't have a question. I was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Great question.
Wait, just while everybody's